Imagine this. You invite a few friends over to relax by the lake on a sunny afternoon, just to enjoy your own property. Out of nowhere, the neighborhood HOA Karen storms over, pointing fingers, demanding that your guests leave immediately. She claims the lake belongs to the HOA and accuses you of breaking community rules. But what she doesn't know? The land and lakefront are actually part of your private property. The moment you tell her, everything changes. Her face says it all. You won't believe how fast the situation flipped. Then, screeching tires. A black SUV rolled up, dust kicking behind it. The door slammed and out she came, Karen, the HOA president. Arms crossed. Eyes sharp as knives, she marched straight down to the dock, her heels clicking like gunshots. "Party's over," she barked. "These guests aren't allowed here." I froze for a second. Not from fear. From disbelief. "This is my private land," I said calmly, stepping forward. Her face went pale, but her voice grew louder. "Not anymore. This lake is ours. Your so-called guests need to leave now." That's when I realized this wasn't just about a party. This was about control. One of my guests muttered nervously, "Is she serious?" Another whispered, "Can she actually do that?" Karen's smirk widened. She pulled out a folder, papers flapping in the breeze. "HOA bylaws," she snapped. "Page 12, Section 4. I run this lake." I looked her dead in the eyes and said the words that changed everything. "You don't run me, and you don't own this land." The silence that followed was heavy. The kids stopped laughing. Even the birds seemed to vanish. She came to flex her power. But what she didn't know was who she was up against. Karen's hand trembled as she pointed at my guests. "If they're not gone in 5 minutes, I'll make a call you won't forget." But that was her mistake, because the call I had already made was one she would never see coming. When arrogance collides with truth, only one side survives. Now tell me, what would you do if the HOA tried to throw your friends off your property? Comment below and stick around, because the trap I set that day, it turned her world upside down. Karen's threat hung in the air like thunder that hadn't struck yet. My guests shifted uncomfortably, their fun drained in seconds. The smell of barbecue was still in the air, but now it felt like smoke before a fire. I could see it in her eyes. She was used to people folding. She thrived on fear. She thought this was just another day of flexing her so-called authority. But sometimes, power is only as strong as the lies behind it. I walked closer, closing the gap between us until her perfume mixed with the lake breeze. "Go ahead," I said quietly. "Make your call." For the first time, she blinked. Her jaw tightened. She wasn't expecting defiance. One of her lackeys, a tall man in a cheap polo, stepped forward. "Ma'am, should I escort them out?" "Try it," I said, my voice firm enough to freeze him mid-step. Karen snapped, her anger spilling over. "This is harassment. You're violating HOA code and endangering community peace." Community peace. That's what she called it. A woman storming onto private land, shouting at my friends, ready to throw families into chaos for her son's spoiled entitlement. My best friend Mark leaned over and whispered, "She's bluffing, right?" I didn't answer. Because here's the thing. Karen wasn't bluffing. She believed in her power. And people like her, they're the most dangerous of all. She thought intimidation was the end of the story. What she didn't know was that it was only the beginning. I turned back to my guests. "Stay where you are. You're not going anywhere." Karen's phone was already in her hand, her nails tapping the screen like she was summoning an army. "You'll regret this," she hissed, and then the sound came, tires crunching on gravel. Another car is pulling in. The mood shifted instantly. My guests looked around nervously. Mark muttered, "Great, more of them." Karen straightened, confidence flooding back into her face. "Perfect timing," she smirked. The SUV pulled up beside hers. 2 men stepped out, dressed in uniforms, but not the kind you'd trust. Too clean, too staged. Their badges didn't shine. They looked printed. Karen gestured grandly. Officers, this man is trespassing on community property. Remove him and his guests immediately. The fake officers walked with stiff confidence, their boots heavy on the dirt. One of them barked, "All right, everyone off the dock." "Pack it up." I stepped between them and my guests. "Not another step," the taller one sneered. "You don't give orders here." I met his stare. "This isn't community land. This is my deeded property." "You're trespassing," Karen laughed behind me. "Oh, how cute. He thinks paper means anything against the HOA. The wolves were circling, but what they didn't see was the trap already set in motion, because the call I had made wasn't to a lawyer. It wasn't for a neighbor. It was to someone much closer, my brother. A sheriff's deputy. And as Karen's imposters tried to posture, another sound broke through the tension. The faint wail of real sirens. In miles away, but closing fast. The fake officers froze, their fake badges suddenly feeling heavier on their chests. Karen spun around, her smirk faltering. What is that?" I leaned in, my voice low and calm. "That's the sound of your empire cracking." But I didn't let my face show how hard my heart was pounding, because I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Karen's eyes darted between me and the approaching sound. Her phone slipped slightly in her hand. "No, this is my lake. You don't understand. My son," and there it was. The real reason. All of this, all the threats, all the theatrics, because her spoiled son wanted to claim what wasn't his. Sometimes the greediest wars start with the smallest wants. But greed never stops at one demand. The fake officers glanced at each other, panic flickering in their eyes. They weren't here to fight real law enforcement. They were here to scare families. To play pretend. And they knew their time was running out. But Karen? She wasn't finished. She took a step closer, her voice trembling but loud. "This isn't over. You'll lose everything before I do." The sirens grew louder, bouncing off the water, echoing across the trees. And in that moment, standing between my terrified guests and a woman who believed herself untouchable, I knew the storm hadn't peaked yet. The real showdown was seconds away, and when truth collided with power, nothing would be the same again. The air grew heavy as the sirens wailed closer, each second slicing through Karen's illusion of control. My guests stood frozen on the dock, unsure whether to run, to stay, or to simply hope this nightmare would vanish with the sound of tires on gravel. Karen's voice cracked as she barked at her imposter officers. "Do something! Get them off my lake before it's too late." But too late had already arrived. Fear has a way of revealing truth, and in that moment, the truth was clear. Karen's empire was built on sand. The fake officers exchanged uneasy glances. One muttered under his breath, "We didn't sign up for this." The other straightened, puffing his chest like bravado could hold back reality. I raised my hand, palm open toward them. "You've got one chance. Walk away now, before those sirens stop at this driveway." For a heartbeat, I thought they might listen. But Karen, trembling, lashed out in desperation. She shoved one of them forward. "Do it. Arrest him. I'll handle the rest." The man stumbled toward me, but his steps lacked conviction. His eyes darted to the road, where the glow of red and blue lights was beginning to flicker through the trees. Behind me, Mark whispered, "They're not real cops, are they?" I kept my gaze steady. "No, and now everyone's about to find out." The roar of engines grew louder. Real cruisers tore down the gravel, sirens screaming, lights painting the lakefront in streaks of fire. The imposters froze. Karen's face went pale, and then the moment snapped. Deputies poured out of the cruisers, weapons drawn, their voices sharp as knives. "Hands in the air. Nobody move!" Chaos erupted. My guests stumbled back, shielding their kids. The imposter officers dropped their props, plastic badges, cheap handcuffs, everything clattering uselessly to the ground. One tried to run. He didn't make it 10 steps before being tackled hard into the dirt. Karen screamed. "You can't do this. This is my authority, my lake." The sheriff himself emerged from the last cruiser, his stride slow, deliberate. He'd heard every word I'd told him on the phone, and now he was here to finish it. "Karen," he said, his voice flat as stone, "step away from these people." "You're under arrest." She staggered back, disbelief carving deep lines across her face. "Arrest? For what?" "This is HOA business." The sheriff raised an eyebrow. "Fraud, harassment, conspiracy, impersonating law enforcement." He looked to the imposters still pinned in the dirt. "And that's just for starters. When justice walks through the door, excuses slam shut." Karen's son, still lounging in the SUV, suddenly realized the tide had turned. He ducked low, as if hiding would erase his smug smirk from earlier. But the deputies had already seen him. "Out of the car," one barked. "Now," Karen shrieked, thrashing against the deputies trying to cuff her wrists. "Leave him alone. He's just a boy." But he wasn't just a boy. He was the reason this war had started. The spoiled heir to Karen's delusion of power. And he too was about to face the weight of consequences. Every empire crumbles. Sometimes it starts with the queen. Sometimes with the heir. Karen turned her glare on me as they dragged her toward the squad car. Her voice was venom. "This isn't the end. You'll regret this. I'll destroy you." I stood my ground, though my chest thudded with the adrenaline of it all. "Your threats die here, Karen. This land was never yours to take." The sheriff glanced at me, then at my terrified guests. "We've got it from here," he said firmly. "You did the right thing. But be ready. She'll fight this in every courtroom she can buy her way into, and I knew he was right. Sometimes victory isn't the end of the battle. It's the beginning of the war to keep what you've won." The squad cars roared away, carrying Karen, her son, and the imposters with them. My guests slowly exhaled, relief flooding their faces. Some even cheered, clapping me on the back, thanking me for standing firm. But inside, I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I watched the taillights disappear into the night and felt the weight of Karen's promise burning in my ears. This isn't the end. Because with people like her, it never is. And as I stood there on the edge of my land, the lake reflecting the flashing lights fading into the distance, I realized this story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The convoy of squad cars disappeared into the night, their sirens fading into the distance, but the echoes of Karen's screams still clung to the air. My guests lingered on the dock, torn between relief and the strange numbness that comes after staring chaos in the face. Victory should feel sweet. But sometimes, even when the villain falls, the shadow they leave behind is darker than ever. The sheriff stayed behind with one deputy, walking the perimeter of my property, documenting the damage. Broken fencing, scattered papers, tire ruts carved deep into the earth, evidence of the storm Karen had unleashed. Mark stood beside me, shaking his head. I thought tonight was going to be burgers and beer. Not arrests and fake cops. I tried to smile, but it felt hollow. That's Karen for you. She doesn't knock on doors, she kicks them down. The sheriff returned, his flashlight cutting through the dark. His tone was steady, but his eyes betrayed the weight of experience. You should know this won't end tonight. People like her, they don't accept defeat. They buy lawyers. They twist rules. They turn neighbors against neighbors. She'll fight this every way she can, and I knew he was right. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought in the open. They're fought in silence, in courts, in whispers, in sleepless nights, wondering when the hammer will drop again. My guests began packing up, offering nervous goodbyes. "Thanks for standing up for us," one family said, voices trembling. "If you hadn't been here, I don't even want to think what would have happened." Their gratitude was real, but their fear was deeper. They'd seen what Karen was capable of. and now they'd think twice before setting foot here again. As the last car pulled away and the lake fell silent, I stood alone at the water's edge. The reflection of the moon shimmered across the waves, broken only by ripples from the wind. For the first time in weeks, I let myself breathe. But then I remembered the look in Karen's eyes as the cuffs snapped around her wrists. The fury, the venom, the promise. This isn't the end, her words were carved into my mind. And as much as I wanted to believe justice had sealed the chapter, I knew this was just an intermission. The queen had fallen. But the board she ruled still stood. And wars like this, they're never won in a single night. I turned back toward the house, my boots crunching on the gravel. The glow of police headlights had long vanished, but their absence made the night feel heavier. Somewhere out there, Karen's allies were already plotting. Somewhere out there, her son was licking his wounds, vowing revenge. And here I was, caught in the eye of the storm. Justice had cracked her empire, but survival? That would mean facing everything that came next. As I locked the door and stood in the silence of my home, one truth echoed louder than all the rest. This fight wasn't finished. The days that followed felt like the calm after a hurricane. The lake, once a battlefield, returned to its quiet rhythm. Ducks glided across the water. The breeze carried the smell of pine instead of fear. Yet underneath that calm, I could still feel the scars of Karen's war. Neighbors who had once avoided me began stopping by. Some offered apologies, others whispered their own horror stories of Karen's reign. One elderly couple admitted, "We always thought she was untouchable." Watching her hauled off in cuffs, it was like the whole town finally took a breath. When a tyrant falls, the silence they leave behind is filled with voices once too scared to speak. Karen's son vanished from the lake entirely. His car no longer parked arrogantly by the dock. Rumors swirled. Some said he'd gone to live with relatives, others whispered about debts and shame. Whatever the truth, he wasn't coming back to claim what was never his. But Karen herself? Her name flooded local papers. Fraud, conspiracy, harassment. The mugshot told the story better than any headline. An empire cracked wide open. I should have felt triumphant. And in some ways I did. But more than anything, I felt tired. Battles like this don't just bruise property lines, they bruise the soul. Still, standing at the edge of the lake, watching the water sparkle in the morning sun, I knew the fight had been worth it. Not just for me, but for everyone she'd ever bullied. Justice doesn't erase scars, but it reminds us scars mean we survived, and that's the lesson. Stand your ground. Don't fold to intimidation, because the moment you refuse to bow, their power begins to crumble. So now I ask you, what would you do if the HOA tried to take your land? Would you fight or walk away? Tell me in the comments. Your story might be the next one I tell, and if you want more battles like this, where ordinary people stand up against corruption and win, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Because trust me, these aren't just stories. They're warnings, and they're far from over.